Hey everyone, and welcome back to our series where we dive deep into some of the most powerful and human stories ever told. Today, we're restarting a journey into the life of one of the most fascinating figures from the book of Genesis, Joseph. This isn't just an old story. It's a tale packed with drama, family dynamics, jealousy, and dreams that you might find surprisingly relatable. So grab your drink, get comfortable, and let's get into part 1. Joseph, the favored son. To really understand Joseph, we have to go back to his family tree. His father was Jacob, a man whose life was already a blockbuster movie in itself. Jacob had 12 sons who would become the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. These sons were born from 4 different women, his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, and their 2 handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. Now here's the crucial piece of the puzzle. Jacob loved Rachel more than anyone. He had worked for her father, Laban, for 14 years just to marry her. But for a long time, Rachel couldn't have children, which was a source of deep sorrow for both her and Jacob. After years of waiting and praying, finally, in Jacob's old age, Rachel gave birth to a son. They named him Joseph. Can you imagine the joy? Joseph wasn't just another son. He was the long-awaited child of Jacob's true love. The Bible tells us in Genesis 37, Verse 3, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. The name Israel, by the way, is the new name God gave to Jacob. So from the very beginning, Joseph was set apart. He was the golden child, the miracle baby, the living symbol of his parents' love story. This deep, overflowing love that Jacob had for Joseph wasn't something he kept to himself. He showered Joseph with affection and attention in a way he didn't with his other sons. And to make this favoritism visible for everyone to see, Jacob did something special. He made Joseph a truly unique gift, a coat of many colors. Now, translations differ on this. Some say it was a long-sleeved tunic or an ornate robe. Whatever the exact design, the point is that this was no ordinary piece of clothing. It was luxurious, expensive, and a status symbol. It was the kind of garment worn by royalty or the very wealthy. In a family of shepherds, this coat screamed, "I am different. I am special. I am my father's favorite." Think about it from the brothers' perspective. There are 10 of them, all older than Joseph. They've been working hard, tending the flocks, doing the tough, dirty work of a shepherd's life. They see their father doting on their little brother, this teenager who gets to stay home more, and who struts around in a designer robe while they out in the fields. How would you feel? It's a recipe for disaster. The Bible is very clear about their reaction. It says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. The family dinner table must have been incredibly tense. The coat wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was a constant, visible reminder of their father's unequal love, and it fueled a growing fire of resentment and jealousy. And if things weren't bad enough, Joseph, in his youthful innocence or perhaps a bit of naivety, made the situation a whole lot worse. He started having powerful, prophetic dreams, and he didn't keep them to himself. He decided to share them with the very people who already couldn't stand him, his brothers. The first dream went something like this. "Listen to this dream I had," he said. "We were all out in the field, binding sheaves of grain. Suddenly my sheaf stood up straight, and all of your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to mine. You can just imagine the eye rolls and the clenched jaws. His brother's response was immediate and sarcastic. "So you're going to be our king, are you? You think you're going to rule over us?" The dream confirmed their worst fears. It wasn't just that their father loved him more. It seemed that even the universe was conspiring to elevate Joseph above them. The Bible says they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. But Joseph wasn't done. He had another dream, and this one was even grander. He told his brothers, "I had another dream. This time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." This time he didn't just tell his brothers. He told his father, too. Even Jacob, who adored Joseph, was a bit taken aback by this one. He rebuked him, saying, "What kind of dream is this? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" The sun representing the father, the moon the mother, and the 11 stars his 11 brothers, the symbolism was unmistakable. And this is where we see the key themes of this first chapter of Joseph's life really crystallizing: favoritism, jealousy, and the seeds of a massive conflict. Jacob's blatant favoritism, symbolized by that infamous coat, created a toxic environment. It pitted brother against brother and planted a deep-seated jealousy that would soon bear bitter fruit. Joseph's dreams, while prophetic and from God, were the spark that lit the fuse on an already explosive situation. They painted a picture of a future that his brothers found absolutely intolerable. As we know, with great favor often comes great envy, and that is exactly where our story picks up today, a tale of jealousy that spirals into a heart-wrenching betrayal. Imagine this: Jacob, concerned about his older sons who are out tending the flocks, sends his beloved Joseph to check on them. It's a simple fatherly request. "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." So Joseph, obedient as ever, sets off from the valley of Hebron, traveling all the way to Shechem. He's just a teenager on a mission from his dad, probably excited to see his brothers. But when he gets to Shechem, they're not there. A man finds him wandering in the fields and tells him the brothers have moved on to Dothan. So Joseph presses on. He's determined to find them. This detail is so important, it shows Joseph's innocence and his commitment to his father's command. He's not looking for trouble. He's just trying to do the right thing. Meanwhile, the brothers see him coming from a distance, and the sight of him, probably with that vibrant coat making him stand out against the landscape, doesn't spark brotherly affection. Instead, it ignites a fire of pure hatred. Their jealousy, which has been simmering for years over the coat and the dreams, finally boils over. They don't see their little brother approaching. They see that dreamer. And right then and there, a sinister plot is hatched. Here comes that dreamer. They sneer at each other. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." It's shocking, isn't it? The speed at which they turn from sibling rivalry to a murder plot is terrifying. They want to not only eliminate Joseph, but also to mock his God-given dreams, to prove them false once and for all. This is the ultimate act of trying to thwart destiny. But there's one voice of reason, or at least a voice of lesser evil. Reuben, the eldest brother, is horrified. He knows this is a line they cannot cross. He says to them, "Let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Now, Reuben isn't a perfect hero here. His plan is to secretly come back later, pull Joseph out of the pit, and return him to their father. He's trying to save Joseph's life, but he does it through deception, afraid to confront his brothers directly. It's a compromised conscience, but it's enough to prevent immediate murder. The other brothers agree. It's a cleaner, less direct way to get rid of Joseph. So when an unsuspecting Joseph finally reaches them, ready to deliver his father's greetings, they don't welcome him. They attack him. They violently strip him of his robe, that beautiful, ornate coat, the very symbol of their father's love and their own jealousy. Imagine the terror and confusion Joseph must have felt. One moment he's looking for his family, the next he's being assaulted by them. And then they throw him into an empty cistern, an empty well. It's dark, it's cold, and he's utterly alone. The brothers, having disposed of their problem, sit down to eat a meal. The callousness is breathtaking. They are eating, likely, the very food their father sent them with, while their brother is in a pit, his cries for help echoing unheard, or at least unheeded. The Bible tells us later, in Genesis 42, that they saw his distress and how he pleaded with them, but they wouldn't listen. It's a chilling detail that shows the hardness of their hearts. As they're eating, a new opportunity presents itself. They look up and see a caravan of Ishmaelites, merchants coming from Gilead, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to Egypt. This is where another brother, Judah, steps in. Perhaps his conscience is starting to prick him, or maybe he's just being pragmatic. He says, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." Think about that logic. It's twisted, isn't it? He acknowledges that Joseph is their brother, their own flesh and blood, and uses that as a reason not to kill him, but to sell him into slavery. For Judah, selling him is a better option. It gets Joseph out of their lives forever. They don't have his blood directly on their hands, and they even make a profit. The other brothers agree. It's a disturbingly practical solution to them. So when the Midianite merchants who were traveling with the Ishmaelites pass by, the brothers pull Joseph up out of the cistern. They sell their 17-year-old brother for 20 shekels of silver. This price, by the way, was the standard price for a male slave under the age of 20, according to the law of Moses later on. They literally valued their brother at the price of a common slave. And just like that, Joseph is bound and taken away by strangers, heading toward a foreign land, his life shattered in an instant. Now, remember Reuben, the one who planned to save Joseph? He wasn't there for the sale. When he returns to the cistern, intending to rescue his brother, he finds it empty. He is devastated. He tears his clothes, a sign of extreme grief and despair. "The boy isn't there," he cries to his brothers. "Where can I turn now?" Reuben's plan failed. He tried to do the right thing halfway, and it wasn't enough. His cowardice in not standing up to them directly has led to this disaster. But the brothers' evil work isn't done. They can't just go back to their father and say Joseph is missing. They need a cover story. So they take that beautiful coat, the one that started it all, and they commit one final act of cruelty. They kill a goat and dip the coat in its blood. They are about to break their father's heart with the most calculated, vicious lie. They take the blood-stained robe back to their father, Jacob. They don't even claim it's Joseph's. They present it with a cold, feigned innocence. We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe. They make Jacob draw his own conclusion, twisting the knife even further. And of course Jacob recognizes it immediately. The sight of it confirms his worst fears. "It is my son's robe." He cries out. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. The lie works perfectly. Jacob is plunged into a grief so deep, it seems it will never end. He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, and mourns for his son for many, many days. His other children, the very ones who caused this pain, try to comfort him. Can you imagine the hypocrisy? They come to their father, offering empty words of solace, all while hiding their monstrous secret. But Jacob refuses to be comforted. "No," he says, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." He is convinced he will carry this sorrow to his death. This chapter is a master class in the destructive power of jealousy and the devastating ripple effects of betrayal. The brothers, in trying to destroy Joseph's dreams, have instead set in motion the very events that will eventually fulfill them. And they've left a trail of immense suffering in their wake, not just for Joseph, but for their father, and ultimately for themselves, as they will have to live with this guilt for decades. Joseph is now on his way to Egypt, a slave, seemingly abandoned by everyone. His future looks bleak. His dreams appear to be nothing but a cruel joke. But as we'll see, even in the darkest pit, even in the chains of slavery, God has not abandoned him. This is not the end of Joseph's story. It's the beginning of a new, unimaginable chapter. Imagine the scene: the bustling markets, the unfamiliar language, the towering monuments. For a young man torn from his home, it must have been overwhelming. It's here that Joseph is sold once again, this time to a man named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar wasn't just anybody. He was a high-ranking official, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. This was a position of immense power and influence in the Egyptian court. Joseph, a Hebrew slave, was now part of one of the most powerful households in the land. You might think this is where Joseph's story takes another downturn. He's a slave, far from home, with no friends or family. But this is where we see a powerful theme emerge, one that runs through Joseph's entire life. The Bible tells us the Lord was with Joseph. Think about that for a moment. Even in the lowest, most difficult circumstances, he wasn't alone. This wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It had tangible results. The scripture says he became a successful man. Everything Joseph touched seemed to prosper. Whether he was working in the fields or managing household tasks, there was an unusual quality of success in his work. This wasn't just luck or Joseph's natural talent, though he was certainly capable. The text makes it clear that this prosperity was a direct result of God's presence in his life. And people noticed. His master Potiphar saw it plainly. He observed that the Lord was with Joseph, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. This is a key point. Joseph's faith wasn't a private, hidden thing. It was so evident in his character and his work that even his Egyptian master, who worshipped different gods, could see that the God of Joseph was real and powerful. Joseph lived his faith out loud, not necessarily through preaching, but through his diligence, his integrity, and the blessed results of his labor. Potiphar was so impressed that he began to favor Joseph. He saw this young man wasn't just an ordinary slave. He was trustworthy, competent, and had a remarkable ability to manage things well. So Joseph was promoted. He was moved from working in the fields or doing menial tasks to serving Potiphar directly in his house. He became his personal attendant. This new role gave Joseph a chance to demonstrate his abilities on a larger scale, and he didn't disappoint. The favor he found with Potiphar continued to grow. Potiphar saw that Joseph could be trusted with more and more responsibility. It is a wonderful lesson for all of us. When we are faithful in the small things, we are often given opportunities for bigger things. Joseph didn't complain about his situation. He simply did his best with the tasks he was given, and his excellence shone through. Eventually, Potiphar's trust in Joseph became absolute. The Bible says Potiphar made him overseer of his entire household and put him in charge of everything he owned. Let that sink in. A foreign slave was now the CEO of a powerful Egyptian official's entire estate. From the moment Joseph took charge, the Bible tells us that the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing wasn't just on Joseph anymore. It overflowed to everyone and everything around him. The blessing was on Potiphar's house and on his fields. This is a powerful picture of how one person's faithfulness can bring blessings to many. Potiphar's life was made easier and more prosperous simply by having Joseph in his home. The trust was so complete that the scripture gives us this amazing detail. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Imagine that level of trust. Potiphar handed over the keys to his entire life, his finances, his property, his staff, and didn't worry about a thing. He knew it was all in capable, and more importantly, trustworthy hands. Joseph had risen from the pit to the pinnacle of power within Potiphar's household. He went from being a piece of property to being the master of the property. It's a stunning reversal of fortune. And it all happened because the Lord was with him, and because Joseph, for his part, chose to live with integrity and diligence, even when circumstances were bleak. He didn't let bitterness or despair consume him. Instead, he channeled his energy into excelling right where he was planted. His story in Potiphar's house is a testament to the fact that our circumstances don't have to define our character or our destiny. God can use us and elevate us no matter where we are. Joseph's life was a living witness to Potiphar of the power and goodness of his God. He brought honor to God's name not through grand speeches, but through quiet, consistent, and excellent service. But as we know, life is full of ups and downs. Joseph's time of peace and prosperity in Potiphar's house is about to face its greatest test yet. Just as he reaches this new height, a new and dangerous trial is waiting right around the corner, one that will test his integrity to its very core. We already know Joseph has gone from being a favored son to a slave in Egypt, but through it all, he's remained faithful, and God has blessed him. He's now the head servant in the house of Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's highest officials. Everything Joseph touches prospers. He's earned trust, he has authority, and things are finally looking up. But as we're about to see, success can bring its own set of dangerous challenges. A storm is brewing, one that will test Joseph's character like never before. Welcome back, and let's dive into the next chapter of this incredible journey. So Joseph is running Potiphar's entire household. The Bible says Potiphar entrusted to his care everything he owned. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. That's an astonishing level of trust. It speaks volumes about Joseph's competence, his honesty, and his character. But someone else was noticing Joseph. and not for his administrative skills. Genesis tells us that Joseph was well built and handsome. Potiphar's wife began to look at him with desire. This wasn't a passing glance. The original language suggests a persistent, intense gaze. She saw him not as a person, not as a faithful servant, but as an object for her own gratification. And she didn't just look. She took it a step further. One day she approached him with a blunt, shameless command. "Come to bed with me." Now let's pause and consider the immense pressure Joseph was under. This wasn't just some random person. This was the wife of his master, the woman who held incredible power over his life. A slave's life was not his own. Saying no to her could have immediate and devastating consequences. He could be beaten, sold off, or worse. Saying yes, on the other hand, might have seemed like the easy way out. Maybe it would even improve his standing, win him more favor. From a purely worldly perspective, refusal looked like career suicide. It was a high-stakes, no-win situation. How many of us, in a moment of intense pressure, might be tempted to compromise, to rationalize, to take the path of least resistance? This is a moment of truth for Joseph. What will he do? Joseph's response is one of the most powerful displays of integrity in the entire Bible. He doesn't just say no. He explains why. First, he appeals to his loyalty to Potiphar. He says, "My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife." He's reminding her and himself of the trust that has been placed in him. He's not just a slave, he's a trusted steward. To betray that trust would be a profound act of disloyalty. He honors the human relationship and the responsibility he's been given. He is loyal to the very man who owns him, but then he goes deeper. This is the crucial part. He says, "How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Did you catch that? His ultimate reason wasn't about Potiphar. It wasn't about the fear of getting caught. It wasn't about social consequences. His primary concern was his relationship with God. He saw this act not just as a betrayal of his master, but as a direct sin against the Holy One. This reveals the core of Joseph's character. His moral compass wasn't set by his circumstances or the people around him. It was set by his reverence for God. He lived with a constant awareness of God's presence. Even in a foreign, pagan land as a slave with no rights, Joseph knew he was accountable to a higher authority. This is a powerful lesson for us. Who are we when no one is watching? Our true character is defined not by what we do when we might get caught, but by what we do when we believe only God can see. Joseph chose integrity over opportunity and godliness over personal gain. You might think that such a noble refusal would be the end of it. But temptation rarely gives up after the first no. The scripture says she spoke to Joseph day after day, but he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Think about that. Day after day. This wasn't a one-time test. It was a relentless, grinding campaign of pressure. Every morning he probably woke up dreading the inevitable encounter. She would approach him, maybe with promises, maybe with threats. It was a constant assault on his resolve. Joseph's strategy here is also instructive. Not only did he refuse her words, but he also refused to even be with her. He practiced avoidance. He understood that you don't play with fire. He actively removed himself from the situation as much as possible. He knew that lingering in the place of temptation is a recipe for disaster. It is a practical wisdom we can all apply. Sometimes the strongest thing to do is to run away. But one day the situation escalated. Joseph came into the house to do his work, and none of the other household servants were around. It was a setup. Potiphar's wife saw her opportunity. She grabbed him by his cloak, his outer garment, and repeated her demand. "Come to bed with me." This was no longer just a verbal temptation. It was a physical assault. In that critical moment, Joseph did the only thing he could do. He fled. He left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. He chose his purity over his property. He chose his character over his comfort. He literally ran from the temptation, leaving behind the evidence that would soon be used against him. He sacrificed his garment to save his soul. It's a dramatic picture of what it sometimes takes to overcome a powerful temptation. You don't negotiate with it. You don't try to reason with it. You run. Now imagine the scene. Potiphar's wife is left standing there, humiliated, rejected, and holding Joseph's cloak. Her desire quickly turns to rage. Scorned and furious, she decides to destroy the man she could not seduce. She cries out, and when the household servants come running, she weaves a malicious lie. She holds up the cloak as evidence and says, "Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to mock us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he ran, leaving his cloak beside me." Notice how she cleverly twists the narrative. She plays the victim. She even throws a subtle jab at her husband. This Hebrew he brought to us, shifting the blame. She is a master of manipulation. She kept the cloak until her husband, Potiphar, came home. Then she repeated the same fabricated story to him, adding more fuel to the fire. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to mock me, ... The lie is now solidified." Potiphar comes home, tired from his duties, and is met with this explosive accusation from his wife, who is holding up a piece of a slave's clothing as proof. And the Bible says, when his master heard the story his wife told him, he burned with anger. His reaction is swift and severe. He takes Joseph and throws him into the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. Just like that, Joseph's world collapses again. From trusted steward back to the bottom. From the mansion to the dungeon. And for what? For doing the right thing. For honoring God. For maintaining his integrity. He was falsely accused, with evidence twisted against him, and he had no one to defend him. He was condemned without a trial. It seems like the ultimate injustice. Where is God in all of this? Joseph could have been bitter. He could have been angry at God. "I did what you wanted, and this is what I get? A prison cell." This is perhaps the darkest moment in Joseph's story so far. In the dungeon, he is forgotten, abandoned, and suffering for a crime he did not commit. It's a place where hope could easily die. But even here, in the cold, damp darkness of an Egyptian prison, God has not forgotten him. This is not the end of Joseph's story. It's just a painful, necessary chapter. God is still at work, weaving a plan that is far bigger than Joseph's immediate circumstances. This prison, which seems like a punishment, will become the very place where Joseph's gifts are prepared for their ultimate purpose. The pit, the slave block, and now the prison, each one is a step in a journey that is leading somewhere extraordinary. Joseph's faithfulness in the face of temptation, even though it led to suffering, was not in vain. God saw it all. And as we'll see in our next video, even in prison, a person of integrity, filled with the Spirit of God, cannot be kept down for long. God is about to turn this place of despair into a platform for redemption. One day you're the trusted head of a powerful man's household. The next you're in a dark, damp cell, stripped of your status, your reputation, and your freedom. It would be so easy to fall into despair, to become bitter and angry at the injustice of it all. But that's not Joseph's way. Even in the lowest of places, something remarkable happens. The Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Think about that. God's presence wasn't limited to the good times. It was right there with Joseph in the dirt and the darkness of a royal dungeon. And this favor isn't just a feeling. It has practical results. The prison warden sees Joseph's integrity and competence, the same qualities Potiphar saw. He sees a young man who is trustworthy and diligent, even when he has every reason not to be. Before long, the warden puts Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. The Bible says the keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So once again, Joseph rises from the bottom to a position of leadership. He's not just surviving in prison. He's managing it. He's bringing order and efficiency to a place of chaos and despair. This is a powerful testament to his character. He doesn't let his circumstances define his actions. He continues to be excellent, to serve faithfully, no matter where he is. It is a profound lesson for all of us. Your character shines brightest not when things are easy, but when they're incredibly hard. Now the story takes another turn. 2 new inmates arrive, and they're not your average criminals. They are high-ranking officials from Pharaoh's own court, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. The cupbearer was a position of immense trust. He not only served Pharaoh his wine, but was also his personal confidant, and was responsible for ensuring the king was not poisoned. The baker was in charge of all the bread and pastries for the royal household. For both of them to be thrown in prison, they must have seriously offended the most powerful man in Egypt. Joseph is assigned to attend to them. He serves them, cares for their needs, and gets to know them. One morning he comes to them and sees that they both look dejected and troubled. Joseph, with his characteristic empathy, asks them, "Why do you look so sad today?" He doesn't just go about his duties. He notices their distress and reaches out. They reply that they've each had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it. In ancient Egypt, dreams were taken very seriously. They were seen as messages from the gods, omens of the future. For these 2 men, trapped in prison with their fates hanging in the balance, these dreams felt like a matter of life and death. And without a professional interpreter, they were filled with anxiety. This is a pivotal moment. Joseph could have just shrugged and said, "Tough luck," but instead he says something profound. Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Joseph doesn't claim any power for himself. He immediately points to God as the source of all wisdom and understanding. He makes it clear that if any meaning is to be found, it will come from God through him. It's a beautiful act of humility and faith. So the chief cupbearer goes first. He describes his dream. "In my dream there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Joseph listens intently, and with divine insight, gives the interpretation. This is its interpretation, he says. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as you used to do. Can you imagine the relief that washed over the cupbearer? This was the best news he could have possibly hoped for. Freedom, restoration, his old life back. In this moment of joy, Joseph makes a simple, heartfelt request. He says, "Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." He's not demanding or commanding. He's just asking for a little help, a little kindness. He lays out the truth of his situation. He was kidnapped and is now unjustly imprisoned. He's putting his hope in this man's future gratitude. Seeing the positive interpretation given to the cupbearer, the chief baker gets his hopes up. He thinks, maybe my dream is good news too. So he shares his dream. "I also had a dream," he says. "There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." The dream is similar in structure, 3 baskets, just like the 3 branches, but the details are critically different. Joseph, ever faithful to the truth God gives him, delivers the interpretation, and this time it's devastating. "This is its interpretation," Joseph says. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you." Wow, the silence in that cell must have been deafening. Joseph had to deliver a message of life and a message of death side by side. It took incredible courage to speak the truth, even when it was brutal. He didn't soften the blow or change the message. He was a faithful messenger of the revelation he received from God, for better or for worse. And just as Joseph had said, 3 days later it was Pharaoh's birthday. Pharaoh held a feast for all his servants, and exactly as predicted, he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. The cupbearer was restored to his position, once again serving wine to the king. The baker was executed. Joseph's interpretations were 100% accurate. Now, here comes the part of the story that just breaks your heart. The cupbearer is free. He's back in the palace, enjoying his restored status and freedom. Everything Joseph said would happen has happened. And what about Joseph's one simple request? "Remember me." The Bible tells us, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. He forgot him. After everything, after Joseph gave him hope in his darkest hour, after correctly predicting his salvation, the cupbearer walks out of that prison and doesn't give Joseph a second thought. For Joseph, this must have been the cruelest blow of all. He had a ticket out, a connection to power, a promise of help, and it was forgotten. Can you imagine the crushing disappointment? The days turning into weeks, the weeks into months, and then years. Every time a guard walked by did Joseph's heart leap, thinking, "This is it." The cupbearer remembered, only to be met with silence. Day after day, the hope slowly fading. The Bible says he was in that prison for 2 more full years. 2 years of waiting, 2 years of being forgotten. This is where many of us would have given up. This is where bitterness could have taken root and choked out all faith. But the story of Joseph is a story of endurance. It's about what you do in the waiting. It's about holding on to faith when it feels like everyone, and maybe even God, has forgotten you. But as we'll see next time, God had not forgotten. He was just working on a much bigger timeline than Joseph could have ever imagined. Those 2 extra years in prison were not wasted time. They were part of a divine plan, preparing Joseph for the moment he would be called to save not just himself, but an entire nation. Joseph's time in prison is a powerful reminder that God is with us in our lowest moments, that our character is forged in the fire of adversity, and that even when we feel forgotten, God has a plan that is still unfolding. 2 years of waiting, 2 years of hoping, 2 years stuck in a dungeon after the cupbearer, whose life he practically saved, forgot all about him. It's a tough spot and one that tests the faith of even the strongest among us. But as we're about to see, God's timing is always perfect, even when it feels painfully slow to us. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, the scene shifts dramatically from the darkness of the dungeon to the splendor of the royal palace. The most powerful man in the world, Pharaoh himself, is having a very bad night. He has a dream, not once, but twice. These aren't just any dreams. They're vivid, bizarre, and deeply unsettling. In the first dream, Pharaoh is standing by the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 healthy, fat cows emerge from the water and begin to graze. They're a picture of health and prosperity. But then 7 other cows come up from the river. These are nothing like the first group. They are gaunt, ugly, and thin so pathetic. Pharaoh says he's never seen anything like them in all of Egypt. And then the truly disturbing part happens. The 7 skinny, ugly cows devour the 7 fat, healthy cows. But here's the kicker after eating them. They look just as skinny and awful as before. It's as if they hadn't eaten at all. Pharaoh wakes up, disturbed and confused. He manages to fall back asleep, only to have a second dream, equally strange. This time he sees a single stalk of grain, from which 7 plump, healthy heads of grain sprout. They're beautiful, a sign of a bountiful harvest. But then 7 more heads of grain appear. These are thin, scorched by the east wind and completely withered. Just like in the first dream, the 7 thin heads of grain swallow up the 7 plump, healthy ones. Pharaoh wakes up again, his heart pounding. He knows these dreams mean something significant. They're not just random nightmares. They carry a weight he can't ignore. The next morning, Pharaoh's spirit is troubled. The images from his dreams are seared into his mind. So he does what any powerful ruler would do. He summons the best and brightest minds in his kingdom. He calls for all the magicians of Egypt, all his wise men, the counselors, the sorcerers, everyone who claimed to have insight into the supernatural and the future. He recounts his dreams to them in detail, searching their faces for an answer, for some flicker of understanding. But he finds nothing. They are stumped. Blank stares, silence. All the wisdom of Egypt, all its magic and knowledge, is powerless before these dreams. The most powerful man on earth is surrounded by the most brilliant minds, and they are all utterly useless. The tension in the palace must have been unbearable. It is in this moment of collective failure and royal desperation that a light bulb finally goes off in someone's head. The chief cupbearer, the very one Joseph helped 2 years ago, suddenly remembers. He steps forward, likely trembling, and says to Pharaoh, "Today I remember my offenses." He recounts the story of being imprisoned with the chief baker, how a young Hebrew servant, a slave, interpreted their dreams with perfect accuracy. Things turned out exactly as he interpreted, the cupbearer admits. I was restored to my office, and the baker was executed. Talk about a delayed reaction. 2 full years it took for him to remember the man who gave him hope in his darkest hour. But again, God's timing. It wasn't just about getting Joseph out of prison. It was about positioning him for a purpose far greater than he could have ever imagined. If the cupbearer had remembered him a week later, Joseph might have just been given a small reward and sent on his way. But now, in this moment of national crisis, when all human wisdom has failed, the stage is set for something truly divine. Immediately, Pharaoh sends for Joseph. There's no time to waste. They rush to the dungeon, pull Joseph out of his cell. But you can't just bring a prisoner before Pharaoh. He has to be prepared. So they shave him, give him a change of clothes, transforming him from a forgotten prisoner into someone presentable for royalty. Imagine the whirlwind of emotions Joseph must be feeling. After 2 years of silence, he's suddenly being cleaned up and rushed to the palace. He has no idea why, but he's about to stand before the king. Joseph is brought before the throne. Pharaoh looks at this young Hebrew man and gets straight to the point. I've had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it. This is Joseph's moment. He could have taken the credit. He could have said, yes, I am the best dream interpreter in the land. It would have been his chance to puff up his chest and show his value. But what does he do? His response is incredible. He says, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Wow. Right there, in that single sentence, is the key to Joseph's entire character. After everything he's been, through betrayal, slavery, false accusations, imprisonment, being forgotten, his first instinct is to deflect the glory and point directly to God. He understands that any wisdom he has doesn't come from him. It is a gift from the Almighty. He is just a vessel. This humility, this unwavering faith in the face of immense pressure, is what sets Joseph apart. He's not there to make a name for himself. He's there to be an instrument for God's divine purpose. Pharaoh, likely impressed by this humble response, proceeds to tell Joseph the dreams of the cows and the grain, just as he had them. Joseph listens intently. When Pharaoh finishes, Joseph doesn't hesitate. He speaks with a confidence that doesn't come from himself, but from God. He says, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. He then lays out the interpretation with stunning clarity. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 plump heads of grain represent 7 years of great abundance throughout all the land of Egypt. The nation is about to enter a period of unprecedented prosperity. The harvest will be so plentiful, it will be hard to even measure. It's a time of celebration, a time of plenty. But then comes the warning. The 7 gaunt cows and the 7 withered heads of grain represent 7 years of famine that will follow. And this won't be a mild famine. It will be so severe, Joseph explains, that the memory of the 7 good years will be completely wiped out. The famine will consume the land. The reason the dream was repeated, Joseph adds, is because the matter is firmly decided by God, and God will make it happen soon. He not only interprets the dream, but explains its divine certainty. He shows Pharaoh that this isn't a possibility. It's a prophecy. Think about the weight of this message. Joseph, a foreign slave just pulled from a dungeon, is telling the most powerful ruler on earth that his kingdom is headed for a massive society-altering crisis. This is a bold, high-stakes move. But Joseph's job isn't done with just the interpretation. He sees the problem, and through divine wisdom, he also sees the solution. He doesn't just deliver the bad news and step back. He immediately follows up with a practical, strategic plan. He tells Pharaoh, "Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt." He advises Pharaoh to appoint officials over the land to collect a fifth of the harvest during the 7 years of plenty. This grain should be stored in cities under Pharaoh's authority. This stockpile will then serve as a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine, so that the country and its people will not perish. This is not just dream interpretation. This is brilliant economic policy, national security strategy, and logistical planning all rolled into one. It's a comprehensive plan to save a nation. And where did it come from? Not from years of study in an Egyptian university, but from a heart and mind connected to God in a prison cell. This is the core theme of our story today: divine wisdom and purpose. All the wise men of Egypt failed, but God, through a humble and faithful servant, provided not only the warning, but also the blueprint for salvation. Joseph's suffering was not pointless. His years of waiting were not wasted. God was preparing him, shaping him, and positioning him for this exact moment to save a nation and ultimately his own family. 2 full years pass after the cupbearer is restored to his position. Can you imagine? 2 more years for Joseph, languishing in prison, hoping the cupbearer would remember him. It's a powerful lesson in patience and trust in God's timing, not our own. Then a crisis hits the highest office in the land. Pharaoh himself has 2 deeply disturbing dreams. In the first, he sees 7 healthy, fat cows coming out of the Nile, followed by 7 ugly, gaunt cows that devour the healthy ones. In the second dream, he sees 7 plump, good heads of grain growing on a single stalk, which are then swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh wakes up troubled. He knows these dreams are significant, but none of his magicians or wise men in all of Egypt can interpret them. The entire kingdom is in a state of confusion and anxiety. It's in this moment of national crisis that the cupbearer's memory is finally jogged. He suddenly remembers the Hebrew young man in prison who had perfectly interpreted his dream 2 years prior. He confesses his fault to Pharaoh, saying, "Today I remember my offenses." He tells Pharaoh all about Joseph. Desperate for an answer, Pharaoh doesn't hesitate. He immediately sends for Joseph. Imagine the scene. Joseph is hurriedly brought out of the dungeon. He shaves, changes his clothes, transitioning from a forgotten prisoner to an audience with the most powerful man in the world. When he stands before Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, "I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it." I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it. Look at Joseph's response. It's filled with humility and a steadfast focus on God. He says, "It is not in me." God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. He gives all the credit to God right from the start. He doesn't try to take the glory for himself. Joseph then listens to Pharaoh's dreams and with divine insight provides the interpretation. He explains that the 2 dreams are one and the same. God is revealing to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and 7 plump heads of grain represent 7 years of great abundance throughout the land of Egypt. But following those years, the 7 gaunt cows and 7 thin heads of grain represent 7 years of devastating famine. The famine will be so severe that the years of plenty will be completely forgotten. Joseph explains that the dream was doubled to show that the matter is firmly decided by God and will happen soon. But Joseph doesn't stop there. he doesn't just interpret the problem. He offers a solution. This is where we see the wisdom God has cultivated in him through all his trials. He advises Pharaoh, "Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land, and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine." Think about the brilliance of this plan. It's a comprehensive national strategy for economic salvation. It involves foresight, administration, and massive-scale logistics. Pharaoh and his officials are completely amazed. The plan seems so good, so wise, that Pharaoh looks at his servants and asks a rhetorical question. Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? The answer is standing right in front of him. Turning to Joseph, Pharaoh declares, "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only in the throne will I be greater than you." In a single moment, Joseph's entire world is turned upside down, but this time for the good. Pharaoh removes his signet ring, a symbol of his authority, and places it on Joseph's hand. He clothes him in fine linen, puts a gold chain around his neck, and has him ride in the second chariot. People are commanded to bow down before him. Pharaoh gives him a new Egyptian name, Zaphnath-Paneah, and an Egyptian wife, Asenath. At 30 years old, after 13 years of slavery and imprisonment, Joseph goes from being a prisoner in the morning to the prime minister of Egypt by the afternoon. This is a breathtaking display of God's power to elevate the humble. The one who was thrown into a pit is now placed on a pinnacle. Now, with this immense power and responsibility, Joseph gets straight to work. He doesn't waste a moment. During the 7 years of abundance, just as he had foreseen, the land produces crops in such vast quantities, it's almost unimaginable. Joseph travels throughout Egypt, organizing the collection and storage of the surplus grain. The Bible says he stored up grain, like the sand of the sea, in such massive amounts that they eventually stopped trying to measure it. He was diligent, wise, and faithful in his stewardship of the resources God provided through the land. He was preparing the entire nation for the coming crisis. During this time of prosperity, Joseph also experiences personal blessing. His wife, Asenath, gives birth to 2 sons. He names his firstborn Manasseh, which means making to forget, saying, "For God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house." This doesn't mean he literally erased his family from his memory, but that the joy of his present blessing was so great that it overshadowed the pain of his past. He names his second son Ephraim, which means fruitful, saying, "For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." Even in his exaltation, Joseph acknowledges that Egypt was the land of his suffering, yet God had turned that suffering into incredible fruitfulness. His sons' names are a constant reminder of God's redemptive work in his life. Then, just as the prophecy foretold, the 7 years of plenty come to an end, and the 7 years of famine begin. The scarcity isn't just confined to Egypt. The Bible tells us the famine was over all the face of the earth. This was a global catastrophe. But because of Joseph's divinely inspired wisdom and diligent preparation, Egypt was ready. While other nations starved, Egypt had storehouses overflowing with grain. When the Egyptian people cried out to Pharaoh for food, his instruction was simple. Go to Joseph. What he says to you, do. And so Joseph opens up the storehouses and sells grain to the Egyptians. But the story doesn't end there. As the famine worsens worldwide, word spreads that there is grain in Egypt. People from all the surrounding lands begin to journey to Egypt to buy food from Joseph. The very nation where he arrived as a slave now becomes the source of salvation for the known world, and Joseph is the one administering that salvation. From the pit to the palace, from a forgotten prisoner to the Savior of nations. It's an unbelievable transformation that could only be orchestrated by a sovereign and loving God. Joseph's story up to this point is a powerful illustration of God's faithfulness. It shows that no matter how deep the pit or how dark the prison, God has a purpose. The years of suffering were not wasted. They were a training ground. In slavery, Joseph learned administration in Potiphar's house. In prison, he learned humility and dependence on God. Every trial was shaping his character, preparing him to handle the immense power and responsibility he would one day be given. His story reminds us that God often works behind the scenes, turning what seems like humiliation into the very path to exaltation. He is a God of second chances, of incredible reversals, and of profound redemption. He's masterminded a plan that has saved Egypt from a devastating famine, storing up grain during 7 years of plenty. Now the 7 years of famine have begun, and it's not just affecting Egypt. The scarcity is widespread, reaching all the way back to the land of Canaan, where Joseph's family lives. This is where our story picks up. Jacob, now an old man, sees that his family's grain supply is dwindling. He hears there's grain available in Egypt, the only beacon of hope in a starving world. So he turns to his sons and says something that's almost painfully practical. Why are you just looking at each other? I've heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die. It's a simple command born of desperation. So 10 of Joseph's brothers head out on the long journey to Egypt. Notice who isn't with them. Benjamin, the youngest. He's the only other son of Jacob's beloved wife, Rachel. After losing Joseph, Jacob is fiercely protective of Benjamin. He's terrified that harm might befall him, so he keeps his youngest son at home. This detail is crucial, and it reveals the deep, unhealed wound still festering in Jacob's heart. The brothers arrive in Egypt, a foreign and intimidating land. They're just 10 men among countless others from all nations, all coming to buy grain from the one man who can sell it, the governor of the land. And who is this powerful governor? It's their own brother, Joseph. They come before him, and as is the custom, they bow down to him with their faces to the ground. Stop and think about that for a moment. All those years ago, a teenage Joseph shared his dreams of his brother's sheaves of grain bowing down to his, and of the sun, moon, and stars bowing to him. Those dreams were the very reason they hated him, the reason they sold him into slavery. And now here they are, unknowingly fulfilling that exact prophecy. The irony is staggering. The Bible tells us that as soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. 20 years have passed, but he knows who they are. They, however, have no idea. Why would they? The last time they saw Joseph, he was a 17-year-old boy being dragged away by slave traders. Now they're bowing before a powerful Egyptian official, dressed in fine linen speaking a different language, and holding the power of life and death in his hands. He is completely unrecognizable to them. This moment is electric. What must have been going through Joseph's mind? Anger? A desire for revenge? The text says he remembered his dreams, but he chose to act as a stranger. He spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He demands. From the land of Canaan, they reply, to buy food. Instead of revealing himself, Joseph makes a shocking accusation. You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. This accusation was a serious one. Spies were enemies of the state, and the punishment would have been swift and severe. The brothers are terrified. They frantically try to defend themselves. No, my lord, they insist. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. We are honest men, not spies. They pour out their family story, hoping the details will prove their sincerity. Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more. Can you imagine the impact of those words on Joseph? One is no more. They're talking about him. He's standing right there, alive and well. Listening to them write him off as dead. This is the story they've been telling their father and themselves for 2 decades. But Joseph isn't finished. He's not just playing a cruel game, he's testing them. He needs to know if these are the same cruel, jealous men who sold him into slavery. Have they changed? Do they feel any remorse? His plan is designed to find out. He declares, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. He lays out a seemingly impossible demand. Send one of you to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so I can test your words and see if you are telling the truth. He then throws all 10 of them into custody for 3 days. Imagine the brothers' terror, huddled together in a foreign prison. The tables have completely turned. They, who once held their brother's life in their hands, are now completely at the mercy of this powerful Egyptian. On the 3rd day, Joseph comes to them with a revised plan, and it's here we see a glimpse of his character. He tells them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. Even in his disguise, Joseph's faith shines through. He's not a ruthless tyrant. His actions are guided by his relationship with God. His new proposal is this. If you are honest men, let one of you remain here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me. Then your words will be verified, and you will not die. Faced with this ultimatum, the brothers' guilt finally boils over. Believing Joseph can't understand them, they start speaking to each other in Hebrew. Surely we are being punished because of our brother, they say. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us. Reuben, the eldest, who had tried to save Joseph years ago, chimes in, Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They are finally confessing their sin. They see a direct line connecting their past cruelty to their present suffering. This is the beginning of their repentance, the very thing Joseph needed to see. And Joseph hears every single word. He has to turn away from them to hide his tears. Their confession, their dawning realization of the gravity of their sin, breaks his heart. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about restoration. Composing himself, he turns back to them. He has to follow through with his plan. He chooses Simeon, the second oldest brother, to be the one held captive. He has him taken from them and bound before their very eyes. This sends a clear, terrifying message. Joseph means business. Then Joseph gives two sets of secret orders. The first is to fill his brothers' sacks with grain, but the second is to put each man as silver, the money they used to pay for the grain, back into his sack, and he also gives them provisions for their journey. It's a confusing mix of harshness and generosity. He's imprisoning their brother and setting a difficult test, yet he's also secretly providing for them, returning their money and giving them food for the road. The brothers load their donkeys and leave, completely unaware of the silver hidden in their sacks. When they stop for the night, one of them opens his sack to get feed for his donkey and finds his silver. Panic sets in. "My silver has been returned," he cries out to his brothers. "Here it is in my sack." Their hearts sink. They see this not as a lucky break, but as another terrible sign. "What is this that God has done to us?" they ask. They feel trapped, convinced that God himself is orchestrating this ordeal to punish them. This brings us to the key theme of this chapter: testing and repentance. Joseph's test isn't born out of spite. It's designed to bring his brothers to a place of genuine sorrow for what they did. He needs to know if they would be willing to sacrifice another brother, Benjamin, to save themselves, just as they sacrificed him. Would they abandon Simeon in a foreign prison? Their journey home is now fraught with fear and anxiety, carrying the heavy burden of explaining all of this to their father, Jacob. Jacob's sons had returned from Egypt with a shocking demand from its powerful prime minister. To prove they weren't spies, they had to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, back with them, they told their father. As if that wasn't enough, one of their own, Simeon, was being held hostage until they complied. The situation back in Canaan was dire. The famine was getting worse, and their grain supply was nearly gone. But for their father, Jacob, the thought of losing another son was unbearable. He had already lost Joseph, and Benjamin was the only other child of his beloved wife, Rachel. "My son shall not go down with you," he declared, "for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey you are to make, you would bring my gray hairs down to the grave in sorrow." But starvation is a powerful motivator. As the famine tightened its grip, Judah, one of the brothers, stepped forward and made a solemn vow to his father. He took full responsibility for Benjamin's safety, pledging his own life and the lives of his sons as a guarantee. "Send the boy with me," he pleaded, "and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, we and you and also our little ones." With a heavy heart, seeing no other choice, Jacob finally relented. He told them to take the finest products of the land as a gift for the Egyptian ruler: balsam, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds, and doubled the money to return what they had found in their sacks. With a prayer to God for mercy, he sent them on their way. Imagine the brothers' anxiety as they journeyed back to Egypt, Benjamin in tow. Their fear only grew when they arrived and were immediately ushered into Joseph's own house. They were terrified, convinced this was a trap to enslave them because of the money they had mysteriously found in their grain sacks on the first trip. They quickly approached Joseph's steward, explaining the misunderstanding, but the steward simply replied, "Peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks." Then, to their immense relief, he brought Simeon out to them. They were then told they would be dining with the Prime Minister himself. When Joseph arrived, they bowed low before him, presenting their father's gifts. Joseph's eyes scanned the group, and he asked, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" After they answered, his gaze landed on the youngest. "Is this your youngest brother of whom you told me?" he asked, and looking at Benjamin, his own full-blooded brother, he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." At that moment, a wave of emotion crashed over Joseph. Seeing Benjamin, his brother from the same mother, alive and well after all these years, was too much to bear. He quickly turned and rushed to his private chambers, where he wept freely. After composing himself and washing his face, he returned to host the feast. He arranged his brothers at the table according to their birth order, from oldest to youngest, which left them staring at each other in utter astonishment. How could this Egyptian official possibly know their exact ages? To top it all off, he served them food from his own table, giving Benjamin a portion 5 times larger than anyone else's. For a moment, their fears subsided as they ate and drank with him, but Joseph's test was not over. The next morning, as his brothers prepared to leave, filled with relief, Joseph gave his steward a secret command. "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, along with his money for the grain." The steward did exactly as he was told. The brothers had not even gone far from the city when Joseph sent his steward to chase them down. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" the steward demanded. "Why have you stolen my master's silver cup?" The brothers were horrified and completely baffled. "Why does my lord say these things?" they exclaimed. "Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Look, the money we found in our sacks we brought back to you. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of us has it, let him die, and the rest of us will be my lord's slaves." Confident in their innocence, they quickly unloaded their sacks. The search began, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest. One by one, the sacks were opened, and then the unthinkable happened. There in Benjamin's sack was Joseph's silver cup. The brothers tore their clothes in despair. Their hope of a safe return was shattered. They were all herded back to the city and thrown before Joseph, who was still waiting for them. Joseph looked at them, his face like stone. "What is this deed that you have done?" he demanded. Judah, speaking for them all, could only say, "What shall we say to my lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my lord's slaves, both we and he also, in whose hand the cup has been found." But Joseph shook his head. "Far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. The brothers are frozen. Leaving Benjamin behind as a slave would be a death sentence for their father Jacob. Judah's promise, their father's grief, and Benjamin's fate all hang in the balance. What will they do? His brothers are heartbroken. Watching their worst nightmare come true, they cannot return to their father, Jacob, without Benjamin. They know the grief would literally kill him. But just when all hope seems lost, one brother steps forward, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. This is where Judah, the very same brother who once suggested selling Joseph into slavery, steps into the spotlight. He approaches the powerful Egyptian governor, who is secretly Joseph, and his voice is filled with raw emotion. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't argue. He lays his heart bare. He tells Joseph about their father, an old man whose life is bound up in the life of his youngest son. He recounts the promise they made to Jacob to bring Benjamin back safely. Judah's speech is one of the most moving pleas in all of literature. He says, "Let your servant remain instead of the boy as a slave to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me?" He offers himself, his own freedom, for the sake of his brother and his father. Seeing this profound change in his brother, this selfless love, is the final straw for Joseph. He has tested them, and they have passed. They are no longer the cruel, jealous boys who threw him into a pit. Judah's willingness to sacrifice himself for Benjamin proves their transformation. Overwhelmed by 22 years of pent-up emotion, Joseph can't maintain his disguise any longer. He orders all his Egyptian attendants out of the room, leaving him alone with his stunned brothers. And then, through loud, gut-wrenching sobs that echo through the palace, he finally speaks the words they could never have imagined. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" Imagine the shock, the terror. The silence in that room must have been deafening. The brothers are speechless, frozen in fear. This powerful Egyptian ruler, the man who holds their lives in his hands, is the brother they sold into slavery decades ago. Their minds must have been racing, replaying their terrible crime. They brace themselves for the revenge they surely deserve. But Joseph sees the terror in their eyes, and his next words are not of vengeance, but of breathtaking grace. He tells them to come closer. "Don't be distressed," he says gently, "and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here." Then he delivers one of the most profound statements of faith ever recorded. "It was not you who sent me here, but God. He sent me ahead of you to preserve life. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph saw God's hand in everything, even in his brother's betrayal. He understood that his suffering had a divine purpose, to save his family and indeed the entire region from a devastating famine. He reframes their greatest sin as part of God's greatest plan. With the air cleared and reconciliation underway, the focus immediately shifts. Joseph is urgent. "Hurry back to my father," he commands, "and tell him his son Joseph is alive. Tell him he is Lord of all Egypt, and that he must come down at once." He instructs them to bring the entire family, all their children, their livestock, everything they own, to settle in the fertile land of Goshen, where he can provide for them during the remaining 5 years of famine. The reunion that follows is pure joy. Joseph falls on each of his brothers' necks, weeping and embracing them. The fear is gone, replaced by conversation and the unbelievable reality that their long-lost brother is alive and has forgiven them. News of the reunion quickly reaches the Pharaoh's palace. And Pharaoh isn't just okay with this. He's thrilled for Joseph. He wholeheartedly endorses the plan, telling Joseph, "The best of all the land of Egypt is yours." He provides wagons for the journey, fresh clothes, provisions, and generous gifts for both the brothers and their father, Jacob. Pharaoh's generosity shows the immense respect and honor he has for Joseph. So the brothers load up the wagons and begin their journey back to Canaan, their hearts full of a story almost too incredible to believe. When they arrive and tell their father, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. Jacob's heart is numb. He can't process it. It sounds like a cruel joke. He has mourned his favorite son for more than 2 decades. But then he sees the wagons, the physical evidence of Pharaoh's provision, and the spirit of Jacob, their father, revives. The grief that has weighed him down for so long finally lifts. "It is enough," he declares. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The journey to Egypt is a monumental pilgrimage for the aging patriarch. Along the way, at Beersheba, God speaks to Jacob in a vision, calming his fears about leaving the promised land. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt," God says, "for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again." With this divine assurance, Jacob and his entire household, 70 souls in all, make their way to Goshen. Judah goes ahead to tell Joseph they are coming. And then, the moment we've all been waiting for. Joseph readies his chariot and rides out to meet his father. As Jacob's caravan comes into view, Joseph sees the old man he hasn't laid eyes on since he was a teenager. He runs to him. The two embrace, and Joseph weeps on his father's neck for a long, long time. After 22 years of separation and sorrow, father and son are reunited. Jacob, holding the son he thought was dead, says, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." It's a scene of overwhelming love, forgiveness, and restoration. Joseph then brings his family before the mighty Pharaoh. It is a fascinating meeting of 2 worlds, the humble shepherd family of Jacob and the glorious court of the Egyptian king. Jacob, though a simple shepherd, carries the authority of a patriarch blessed by God. He blesses Pharaoh, an act that shows his spiritual stature. Pharaoh inquires about Jacob's age, and Jacob describes his life as a difficult pilgrimage of 130 years. Following the meeting, the family officially settles in Goshen, the best part of the land, just as Joseph had planned. And there, in a foreign land, the family of Israel begins to thrive. They are fruitful and multiply exceedingly. What began with betrayal and a pit ends in a palace and prosperity. The story of Joseph shows us that even in our darkest moments, in the face of betrayal and injustice, a bigger plan can be at work. It's a powerful reminder of the nature of forgiveness, the beauty of reconciliation, and the unwavering truth that what is meant for evil, God can use for incredible good. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through Joseph's life. I hope his story has inspired you as much as it has me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next series. We'd love to have you with us. See you next time.